Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig.
Episode 205, recorded May 11th, 2019.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So, last week, you might have noticed that we didn't have a podcast. That was completely unplanned. We had actually recorded about 2 hours of audio, or, tried to record about 2 hours of audio, and it didn't record. So we lost our whole discussion. This was discussing the big battle episode, episode 3, The Long Night, which ended up being a bit controversial, and we ended up discussing a lot about that. We decided that we are going to rediscuss some of that this week, but we just kind of want to get through it quickly. We're not going to break down the episode. We're just going to kind of go over some of the controversy and our opinions on that. And then we're going to dive into season 8, episode 4, and have a discussion about that episode, The Last of the Starks. So let's go back to season 8, episode 3, The Long Night. So there's a few kind of controversies. The first one I'll just get off because it's mostly a technical issue thing and we can get through it really quickly. And that's that the episode was very dark. People had a lot of complaints about this. I want to get through the technical side of it first before we address the other part, the aesthetic side of that, which is that this wasn't all on HBO from the technical side. There were compression issues going on from certain cable companies, from certain streaming services that weren't compressing the video properly, so that you were losing detail that was in the darkness, because it's supposed to be dark. But there's still detail you can see there, but some of the compression in the stream basically just wiped the detail out and it just became black. So a lot of the issues that some people had with that is not on the episode at all. It's on the companies, it's on the technology, it's on the way people watched it. When they eventually put this out on Blu-ray and people buy like a 4K Blu-ray of this and watch it on their TV with HDR or something, 4K HDR TV, it's gonna look gorgeous and beautiful, and that detail's not gonna be wiped out. The compression was an issue with the broadcast on certain cable companies, not all. I watched on Spectrum. A lot of the issues that people complained about just were not the case. I've seen pictures where they compared it, like how it looked on different service companies on different TVs. And you can definitely see that certain companies had just like really shit picture quality, and it's on them. That's not on HBO or Game of Thrones, the show. So I just wanted to get that part cleared off right away. But the other thing, and Will and I both talked about this last week, is that it's supposed to be dark. You're supposed to have this feeling that like the dead could be inches from you and you don't see them until they're on top of you. And that's, I think, an effective part of the episode. I think it's good that you can't necessarily see everything. And it wasn't even just with darkness. They did the same thing when the White Walkers kind of summered like a winter storm, and it was chaotic, and Jon and Daenerys were flying dragons and they couldn't see, and they crashed into each other because they couldn't see. This is all using like vision or your lack of vision as a story device. It's effectively using it, where like things are dark until they're right on top of you. And they did that several times with the Army of the Dead, where like there'd literally be like a line of pure blackness and you could hear them approaching, but you couldn't tell how many there were. You couldn't tell like anything, how big they were, what they had. And then they just kind of popped out of the darkness and it was like right on top of the opposing force. And that's effective. That's a good thing in my opinion. I at no point was I watching the video or watching the episode was I like, oh, I can't see anything. This is garbage. I can't see what's going on. Like it was more like, I can't see anything. What the hell's going on? I can't see anything. Like I felt like I was in there with them. I was among the soldiers and anything could pop out at me at any moment. And it was very intentional.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I turned off my lights and I had no problem, like, seeing, I was streaming too, so I was streaming via HBO Now, and yeah, I couldn't see shit, but as soon as I turned off my lights, I was able to see it pretty clearly. I do admit, it's the first time I had to turn off my lights to watch something, like, at night. Like, this was at night, so it's not like there was, like, sunlight streaming in from my window, kind of, making things worse. so that's kind of the first time I had to do that. But it's
But
fine.
watching in the dark is a better experience, anyways. That's why we watched in the movie theater in the dark.
Yeah, exactly. It felt like watching an epic film in a theater. It was not a big deal.
I wonder what the lighting issues were like for people that actually watched it in theaters, because they did play it in some movie theaters.
That would be interesting. I would imagine that they probably didn't experience any issues, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I think they played it in either like the El Capitan or the Man Chinese in Hollywood. I believe they played it at one of those. They played that episode in 4K, I think, and which it wasn't broadcast that way. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like, yes, that it's a battle that takes place at night. Just because you can't see every detail doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. There are fans that have gone through the episode and brightened it up, and it kind of ruins it. Because you can see, things before you're supposed to see them.
Yeah,
and it takes away the suspense. It takes away those moments. So I just don't understand the people that are like, no, if I can't see it, then it's garbage. That's not how it is. The only good picture is a bright picture. It's
well, there are people just determined to hate on this show no matter what. And
especially this season, man.
Last season it was bad too. I think people are just primed for this season, primed to just sit there and be like, I am gonna hate on this no matter what happens.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think there are some examples where people have a valid point. I think some of the people that have targeted the strategy, saying Jon and Daenerys' strategies at different points, both in this episode and in the next episode we're going to talk about, they did some kind of foolish things, Yeah. And I think there is a point to that. But I think a lot of times that's a sacrifice that was made for a different purpose. And a good example of that would be, sending out the Dothraki forces is okay, well, yeah, you're being sieged. When you're being sieged, you don't send out forces because having the castle gives you an advantage. It allows you to save more troops. That's something that military commanders were actually piping in and saying this is stupid strategy.
We could stop pretending that Jon and Daenerys are supposed to be military geniuses because they're not.
Well, yeah, but even so, it's a very dumb idea to send out the Dothraki into that. But they did that for a purpose. They didn't do it for a strategic purpose. I'm not saying Jon and Daenerys did that for a purpose. I'm saying that the creators of the show and the director of the episode did that for a purpose. And the purpose there was that they had that whole moment with, and we talked about this last week when we recorded this episode that no one's going to hear. We talked about how they have a lot of moments in the episode where they change your emotions multiple times through a single scene, by the events of it. They set you up to feel things are heading one way, and then they change that on you, and sometimes they do a double swerve on. And what they sacrificed the Dothraki for in this scene, where the bad strategy, what it's all for, is that they had a gorgeous moment, a beautifully shot, beautifully put together, very suspenseful moment in which you see the Dothraki go out with swords on fire into the blackness, and you just see these little glowing tips of the swords in the darkness, and then you just start to see them, blink out until it's dark. And that's the moment is when they're heading out, because they had their swords all caught on fire. It was this big morale boost moment. They're heading out, they're cheering. Everybody looks kind of hopeful, and then that turned all their hope to despair.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool scene.
And it's an amazing shot. It's an amazing scene. It's an amazing moment. And yeah, they sacrificed some strategy, some realism for it, but I don't think necessarily that realism is the only measure of quality. We're talking about a show with dragons and ice zombies.
Yeah, but still grounded in
Yeah, even so though, it's I don't think realism is the only measure of quality. Saying oh, is that realistic or not isn't necessarily the best measure of quality.
I think it's realistic that people make mistakes, that people make dumb decisions from time to time, even very smart and capable people do stupid things.
Yeah.
And I don't think think somebody acting foolish or making a mistake should be counted as like, oh, that's because we've gotten to the point that where characters in a fiction aren't 100% perfect all the time, then that's bad writing. It's bad writing to make somebody have flaw, do something foolish.
No, Matt, it's bad, or not Matt, sorry. Will, it's bad writing unless it's a woman, and then it's good writing if they make mistakes, because if they don't make mistakes, then they're a Mary Sue, and that's bad writing.
Yes, that's bad.
So if it's a male character, then they can't make mistakes, or it's bad writing. But if it's a female character, they have to make mistakes, or it's bad writing.
So, and also, I also like talk it down to, this was a different kind of threat that nobody was used to or prepared for fighting, really.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, honestly, I just think that I agree with you to some extent there. I think there are some instances in which, like, the director and the creator of the series, the creators of the series sacrificed, a bit of what would have been realistic for their characters to do in that moment for the sake of drama and, suspense.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine.
Having that money shot, right?
Exactly.
And also because they obviously wanted to dramatically weaken Daenerys' forces going into the end of the series.
Yeah.
There's
I don't think they needed to send out the forces in order to do that. I mean, the forces crashing into the gates did enough of that. So I think it was mostly just a matter of, this wasn't a bunch of like named beloved characters, this is like a bunch of like red shirts.
Yeah,
that they just kind of threw out because it was more important.
Streamers. The only Dothraki character who was ever important to the show was Khal Drogo.
And he's, 8 seasons dead.
Yeah. So yeah, these were a bunch of red shirts.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like they did it for that moment. And I can understand having a complaint about it. What I don't understand is like using that complaint then to write off the entire series.
Yeah, I don't get that.
So, and there's some other complaints people have had. Like I'd mentioned, if it's a female character, they have to make mistakes. So there's a trope in female characters, called a Mary Sue.
Well, it's become female. It wasn't necessarily limited to female characters.
It was initially on a female character named after Mary Sue,
Yeah, it was initially based on, it was initially a female character. Well, what it had come from it was a parody of, it was based on Star Trek fan fiction fandom in the 70s, and a woman wrote a parody of these fan fictions people were writing where they would essentially put themselves in the Star Trek universe to make themselves perfect. So she wrote a parody of that, and she made a character named Mary Sue, who was a parody of like that trope she was seeing in her fan fiction circles, and that's kind of where the trope comes from. That's where the name comes from.
And it's like, if you follow pop culture, the recent period in which you've probably heard that term used a lot is going to be the new Star Wars movies, where Rey is being often referred to as a Mary Sue. Basically the idea is like, oh, she's like a mechanic and she's really good at doing that. Oh, she also happens to be like an ace pilot on the same level as like a Han Solo. Oh, on top of that, like she, ends up having force affinity and masters Jedi abilities instantaneously without any training.
To be honest, I think the term's been co-opted in recent years by people who do not like female protagonists and basically calling anybody who is female and capable of Mary Sue. This leads
men's rights groups a lot.
Yeah, men's rights group. This leads into the next big controversy, which is one I just don't get. But
yeah, this next one just doesn't make any sense at all.
Because after this episode, people started calling Arya a Mary Sue.
Yeah, which is stupid because the idea of a Mary Sue is somebody who's perfect like at everything without any reason to be. Arya is perfect at one thing with 8 seasons of development to be.
Yeah, with 8 seasons of 8 seasons, and we know we know from the time span of the show, between season 1, when she started learning how to fight, and this season, years and years have passed, and she's been at it. She's been training with some of the best people in all of Westeros,
Not even just even her direct training, but she learned cleverness at the foot of Tywin Lannister. She learned brutality at the foot of the Hound.
Yeah.
So this is aside from learning swordsmanship from the First Sword of Braavos and learning assassination skills from the Faceless Men. This is even aside from that. She was learning other traits from people like Tywin Lannister, considered to be the smartest person in Westeros, and learning from the Hound, considered to be one of the most brutal and effective soldiers,
Right.
So it's she's been learning at the feet of all of these masters, basically. And then, she reached a point in, about the end of season 6, where she became actualized. She became complete in her skills. And all her training is basically been for this moment. There are scenes going back to the 3rd season. There are scenes in the 1st season, the 4th episode of the series, where they talk about, what do you say to the god of death? Not today. That's brought back in that episode. In season 8, episode 3, The Long Night, that is brought back in direct, relation to what she should be doing in the episode.
Right.
And the other thing is, you have to think about, that doesn't just make her capable, it makes her the most capable. Because she isn't the best fighter. Brienne giving it her all would probably cut Arya in half. Jon giving it his all would probably cut Arya in half as a straight up fighter against a fighter. But Arya is an assassin. She's not a fighter, so her skills are in stealth.
Yeah.
And nobody, you take the most powerful, brutal people in Game of Thrones. You take a Khal Drogo, you take a Mountain. None of them would have been able to get to the Night King.
No.
Because he was surrounded by his forces.
Yeah, he was,
Nobody would have been able to get through all of that unscathed. And Arya was able to get through it, not because she's so badass that she beat out all them, but because she snuck through them.
At least not in time to save Bran.
Yes.
Yeah,
She got through it with stealth.
Yeah, she got through it with
That's
stealth.
the one skill she has that nobody else in that castle had. Nobody else in that castle has that skill but her.
They demonstrate
so she becomes the only person that it makes sense to do that.
They demonstrate that very fact in that episode. You don't see anybody else in that episode sneaking around.
Yes, and the important thing isn't just that she was sneaking around in the castle and that she was very cleverly sneaking around. It's that they highlighted just how acutely tuned those white senses were to find anybody living. They're walking around and there's a moment when she's hiding and a drop of blood falls off her head and hits the ground. And just the tiny sound of a single drop of blood hitting the ground is enough to turn all of the whites' attention in that direction.
Yeah.
And that's, and the point they're trying to make there is she snuck by within centimeters of some of those whites earlier before that and was completely unnoticed by sound. And if you pay attention and you watch the episode, you notice she's not making a sound as she's walking. There's no sounds to her footsteps. There's nothing at all. She's completely stopped. So that's, I think, it's a really important point that they raised to try to kind of show how could she how is Arya going to be able to sneak past these people? Well, didn't you just see her sneak past all those? That was why that scene existed. It's foreshadowing wise, people are like, oh, it should be Jon that kills him because, they had that, Jon and him had that show off at the end of Hardhome where they were staring each other down and blah, 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 whatever. It's but Arya had the prophecy from, Melisandre in season 3 or is it season 3 or season 4? I can't remember which one, but in which, Melisandre told her she was going to close Blue Eyes forever. It's if you want to play the prophecy card of oh, they've been building up that it's Jon, there's just as much building up that it's Arya that there is that it's Jon.
Well, the Jon prophecy is he's the prince who is promised.
But they've put doubt in that too.
What does that even mean? The prince who people assume that meant he was destined to kill the White Walkers. Maybe that means maybe that prophecy is for something else. Maybe he's destined for other things.
But even that prophecy has there are scenes throughout the series that point that prophecy in the direction of multiple other characters besides Jon.
Right. I mean, at first, even going to Melisandre, Melisandre for the longest time believed that was Stannis.
Yep. There's at one point it was pointed out that it could be Daenerys and that there were similarities between her position as well.
Right.
And you know what? Arya has some hits on that prophecy too. She's got some areas that match up to that as well.
But the Lord of Light brought Jon Snow back, so that has to be for a reason, you think, right?
Yes, exactly. That's why Beric Dondarrion is Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised.
Right, yeah.
Because if you were brought back, Jon's only 1/6 the prince that was promised compared to Beric.
Well, we saw Beric fulfill his destiny. We found out why he die, because he had to be there to make sure Arya survived, got out of that castle alive.
See, that's a thing that this show has done well in the past, and I think has done well even in this episode, as people are criticizing it that there's no actual cleverness or anything in the plot in this season or something. I think that they've done a good job of showing without saying that there's a big chess game going on, and that people were talking. Another thing people were angry about with the episode, Bran was doing nothing. It's well, he didn't have to have a wizard's duel with the Night King. That's not what was ever going to happen, His ability is information. Right. His ability is some level of prophecy of green sight.
He could warg into creatures and, inhabit them and see through them.
Yes.
And he has the ability to see events that happened in the past.
He also has an ability to see events that'll happen in the future. That happened as early as season 2.
He doesn't have any magic. He doesn't have any offensive abilities.
He doesn't cast firebolts and stuff,
Right, exactly. He couldn't do any, people say he's seen there. Well, what's he gonna do to the Night King? He's helpless. What's he gonna do? I don't know.
Peck at him with ravens?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And I think a lot of people are ooh, he's gonna warg into a dragon. It's well, when did they ever hint that was a possibility?
He's gonna warg into a dragon. What's that gonna do? We already saw the dragon fire does nothing to the Night King.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about warging into a dragon that I think a lot of people didn't pay attention to. There are points in the series when they talk about dragons in which it's brought up saying that dragons might be more intelligent than humans. The reason Bran was able to warg into a human, he was only able to warg into Hodor. That was the only one he was able to do, and it was because he was a simpleton.
Right.
If dragons are smarter than humans, and Hodor is the only human that Bran could warg into, why do we assume that he can warg into dragons?
Hodor was basically the limit of Bran's abilities in the first
place.
Yeah.
That was him going to a further extent beyond just simple animals.
Right.
But he's obviously not going to, if dragons are more intelligent than humans, then how is he going to do that? That doesn't make sense.
And that wouldn't have helped him anyway, even if he could.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So it just comes, there's, tons of arguments, but the one thing that I think really matches that I think people don't pay attention to is that Bran's been playing chess. If you notice, every time he talks to a character, he talks to Jaime in episode 2 of the season, he's saying, Jaime's apologizing and he's saying, if you hadn't pushed me out the window, I wouldn't be where I am and you wouldn't be where you are.
Right.
I think the implication of that, and this isn't directly stated, and I'm glad it's not directly stated because I enjoy some level of subtlety, is that everything's kind of finding its place, and that's what Bran's doing.
Well, the implication.
Not just Bran, but the other versions of the Three-Eyed Raven before him.
Well, not just
We're kind of pushing things in that direction.
I think the implication with Bran, with Melisandre, with the visions of prophecy is that there is a destiny that's present or at play. There is a sense of things are happening to affect the outcome of what's going to happen.
Yes, the Lord of Light brings people back so that they can serve a purpose that they died too early to serve.
Although it's questionable if there really is a Lord of Light or where that's coming from.
Yes, it's all up to interpretation, but I mean, I think the point to make, though, is that there are people shaping destiny.
Right.
There's kind of a destiny like, okay, we need this person here at this time for this thing to happen. Well, that person died. Okay, well, the Lord of Light puts him back on the playing field because you need that person at that time.
Right.
So you shape things to fit your outcome. I think Bran is very much doing the same thing.
Jon Snow was murdered, and he came back because he needs to be on the playing field.
And we don't know necessarily what it is. I think there's a very good chance that once he accomplishes what he's supposed to accomplish, he'll probably die.
Yeah, probably.
Because he was brought back to accomplish something, not to come back and be a leader and live out a long, healthy life. That isn't necessarily the case. So, so there's, that's an argument that I have against that, the position against Bran and stuff. But in general, I think that my main position I would have about this episode and about people's reactions to it is, if you're concerned about what it means that they wiped out the Night's King and that it was this early in the season, we still had 3 episodes left, 2 now, but we still had 3 episodes at that point, and, that's a valid concern to have. But it's not valid to just assume at that point that everything that could be the worst case scenario is absolutely true and inarguably so. It's like there are twists that could happen that you don't know about, that you don't see coming, that could completely change your opinion on that. So the thing I would try to say to people is try to keep an open mind. Try to see why the writers chose to go in this direction instead of just going, well, they chose to go in that direction because they're stupid or something. Try to kind of see what their perspective might be, why they would be doing things in that direction. And just because it's not the thing that you would do or that you wanted to see happen doesn't mean it's bad. Try to kind of wait it out and see what happens and see how the story plays out. And if you don't like it, hey, that not everybody's going to like it. But I hate the attitude that this isn't what I wanted, so therefore it is irrevocably, objectively bad. I think that's kind of an arrogant and, I don't know, self-centered view.
I agree. Well, let's talk about episode 4.
Yeah,
let's talk about episode 4. I've been dying to talk with you about episode 4.
Let's talk about episode 4. Let's talk about season 8, episode 4, The Last of the Starks. Before we even start into the actual episode happenings, this is the episode that Jon Snow's actor Kit Harington has said is his favorite episode of the season. He said it was his favorite because it's Shakespearean. That's what he said. And I can really see that because throughout the beginning of the episode, especially the beginning of the episode, things are kind of moving slow, things are kind of dreary.
So
there's really interesting musical choices.
So they're celebrating, right? And Daenerys...
celebrating in quotation marks, because nobody seems that happy.
They're celebrating, and Daenerys bought everybody Starbucks.
Yeah.
That was nice of her.
Yes. Yeah, it's like 4 golds a cup.
Yeah, 4 golds a cup. Yeah, Daenerys is not happy and she's particularly not happy because she's looking over at Jon Snow and she's seeing everybody just rallying around Jon Snow. Tormund's going on and on about him. Tormund's doing this whole speech about how great Jon Snow is.
It's all paranoia and fear.
Yeah, you can see she's getting jealous. She's getting paranoid. She's not happy. Everybody else is happy. So, everybody else is pretty damn happy.
Well, nobody was really happy at all until I think Daenerys actually kind of made everybody happy, ironically, which is it was very dour, and then Daenerys legitimized Gendry.
She is, because and she openly admits it too. She's basically yeah, I'm doing nice things to gain favor from people.
Yeah.
And
but it didn't just gain his favor. It there was a noticeable turn in the tide of events.
It wasn't just his favor though. It was everybody in the room, she would say, look how nice of a person I am.
Yeah.
Look how great I'm going to be as a queen, people.
I think even more importantly than that, at least for this episode, was that by doing that, she elevated the mood.
Right.
Because the mood was very dour.
Yeah.
And then she did that, and that gave kind of cause for celebration. But then that's when things started kind of going away from her, because she started singing. She brought brought this up later to Jon, that, like, she's seen this kind of excitement and devotion and stuff like that, because she's had that same experience over in, like, Meereen and over in Essos.
She is afraid, she spells out to him, she's afraid that if people find out who Jon really is, then they're going to want him to be king, and it doesn't matter whether he wants it or not, because
they'll pressure him into it.
They're going to basically just force him into it.
Yeah.
And
they'll just discard her.
Yeah, her big fear is that she'll lose the support of the people, and she'll be over. It'll be over for her. And it doesn't matter, Jon Snow's like, well, I don't want to be. And she tries to, it doesn't matter what you want. It matters what the people want. And if the people want you and not me, then, that's the issue.
So the argument she makes is that Jon says that he has to, like, I'll stay quiet, but I have to tell Arya and Sansa. And she's saying, no, swear Sam and Bran to secrecy.
She knows.
And never speak of it again.
Yeah, she's afraid of that because she knows Sansa doesn't like her. And if Sansa knew, Sansa would ring the bells and, try to rally people behind Jon, Sansa would have real ammunition to stop Daenerys from becoming queen.
Yeah.
And that's what Daenerys is afraid of. Jon doesn't see that. Jon is kind of like, well, she's my sister. She'll keep the secret if I ask her to. Jon's being kind of naive in this entire conversation. Like, Jon is not used to dealing with politics, beyond what he had to deal with in the Night's Watch, or the little bit he's done at Winterfell. You could see he's not a politician. He's not good at navigating political matters. He's disinterested in it to begin with. So when Daenerys starts talking politics, you can see he's naive and he's kind of clueless.
So Daenerys starts singing some TLC to him. He's like, I ain't too proud to beg. She's like, don't say anything. I'm begging you. Just keep this completely closed off. I don't, otherwise this is going to get out of your hands. You don't realize how things are going to go. This is going to completely destroy me. This will destroy us. This is the only chance we have to be, to be together and to do this. And Jon seemingly agrees with this. We don't see any verbal consent or anything, but he seems to kind of be like bullied into a corner.
And then he runs off and he tells his sisters anyway.
Yeah, he feels put into a position where he's either straight up lying to them or revealing that secret. Bran says that it's his choice, and he, before telling them, has them swear to secrecy on it. Arya's pretty quick to swear to secrecy. Sansa, doesn't want to, but finally consents, agrees, swears to secrecy, and then immediately tells Tyrion. Who immediately tells Varys.
Immediately tells Varys. Yeah, this spreads it. Yeah, Sansa, Sansa does exactly what Daenerys predicted she would do if Sansa was not going to keep that secret. Yeah, and Tyrion tells Varys, and now you end up with a situation where Varys is plotting against Daenerys.
Yeah, and it's basically alluding to the fact that he's gonna kill her.
Yeah.
And Tyrion's now Tyrion's saying, I ain't too proud to beg. Don't kill her. This is wrong.
Tyrion, for his part, he's a true believer in Daenerys and Daenerys' cause.
He sees her faults, but he says, we can work through these.
Right.
Let's not destroy her.
But Varys has a good point in that, Daenerys lusts for power, but maybe Jon Snow would be better because Jon Snow is even-tempered and he doesn't want power to begin with. Power in ruling is not Jon Snow's motivation, so ironically that would make him a better ruler.
Yeah.
That's
Varys' position. Varys is on the side of the people.
Yeah.
He always says that his side is the side of the realm, and by that he means that, there's 1 million people who live in King's Landing, for example. He doesn't care about, the nobility in King's Landing. He cares about the people that nobody knows the names of. And they deserve to live and feed and have a happy life as well.
We get a hint that maybe Varys has a point, that maybe Varys is right, because we see that Cersei decides to bait Daenerys into attacking her and killing a bunch of people in King's Landing. And we see, like, Daenerys, like, and her advisors, arguing about that, because Daenerys decides she's just gonna march in there with her dragons and just kill a bunch of people if she has to. She's like,
burn them all, as her father would say.
Yeah, she's basically like, they're like, you can't just kill a bunch of innocent people. And she's like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going. And so, yeah, we get like that hint that maybe she is not the ruler that we need.
Yeah. So before this happens, we should note that Daenerys really pushed hard to go in pursuit of her goal to go after Cersei very quickly against Sansa's judgment. Sansa saying, hey, your troops need time to recover.
Yeah.
And not just our troops in the north, your troops too. Everybody, we need time to recover or you're going into a battle unprepared. Daenerys is like, nah, fuck that.
Yeah, she's like, nah, fuck that.
I want my damn throne.
Yeah, she's like, I fought your war for you. Like, now we're gonna go fight mine. That's basically her attitude, even though, like, that war was her war too, but she's being kind of petulant, so.
And her pig-headedness basically leads to the death of another one of her dragons.
Yeah, because she goes, like, full steam ahead, and she kind of forgets that, and she's kind of forgotten that they've developed a dragon-killing weapon.
It's, some of it you could say that she kind of forgot. Another thing could be that she disregarded it because it wasn't all that effective.
Right.
If you remember in its previous iteration,
right.
It's changed. That weapon's been updated. If you watch like the making of the episode things or something where the producers talk, they point out that, and I mean, some of it's, you can notice that the weapons are noticeably larger than they used to be. And some of it, like you can see that when the projectiles are shot out, they kind of spin now and the tips kind of open up so they kind of bore through things.
Oh, okay.
Where they were just basically big arrows before.
Right.
So it's a much nastier weapon than it used to be.
What does she do? She charges in, she gets one of her dragons killed, and she gets her ships destroyed. Like everybody washes up on the shore of King's Landing, and Missandei goes missing. Missandei is actually captured in the ensuing confusion.
And heartbreakingly put in chains. Yeah. That's like a big detail that they have at several moments that you see it very visually presented. Right. That she is in chains like a slave again.
And basically, like, Cersei uses Missandei as a bargaining chip.
Yes. Well, she uses it as like a threat. Well, basically say,
like, surrender to me and, I won't kill her.
Yes. Or surrender to me or she dies right now.
Right.
It's not even so much or she won't kill her or she dies now if you don't, It's kind of not even as friendly as you had originally put it there. It's a straight up ultimatum without even a real actual guarantee of safety of any kind for anyone.
Right.
And it's, in a sense, Cersei has no, like, we say a bargaining chip, but Cersei has no belief that this is going to work.
Ooh,
like,
no.
that they're suddenly going to go, oh, okay, fine, you win. No, Cersei's baiting Daenerys into an assault, as you mentioned, and she's basically done Operation Human Shield with the people of King's Landing.
Basically,
she's loaded them into her castle.
Cersei wants Daenerys to come and murder all these people in King's Landing so that she can turn the people against Daenerys. She can show the world how horrible Daenerys is and gain some credibility, some kind of moral high ground. That's her plan.
Yes. And it looks like we should say, it's not confirmed because we have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but, Daenerys.
It looks like she succeeded. Daenerys is very visibly
She's very
angry.
Visibly pissed now. Before she was pissed, she was basically saying, I'm just going to kill these fucking people. I don't give a shit. And, she was already ready to do it. And, now I don't think nothing's going to stop her.
Yeah, she's very angry. I think that's a bit of a misdirect. I'm not sure. You know, we haven't seen the new episode yet. We're recording this on Saturday. The new episode airs tomorrow on Sunday. So we don't know what happens yet or what she ends up doing. I think it's a bit of a misdirect. I think they're trying to make us think that she's just going to go in all guns blazing. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that sometimes Daenerys, when she's at her most pissed off, desperate, angry, she actually ends up being like her most effective.
I think that's when she's at her most cunning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And ends up doing things in a way that actually ends up working, you know, like that, cause this has happened throughout the series before where we have moments where she's pissed off, she's being talked down to, she looks like she's gonna blow up into a rage, we don't know how things are gonna work out, and she ends up making her most strategic and clever assaults.
You know what?
At that point.
What was it that Viserys used to always say to her? You wouldn't want to wake the dragon.
Yes.
I think that's what happens when Daenerys gets pissed. They wake the dragon, and the dragon is more cunning and dangerous than anybody realizes at the time.
Everybody thinks that by dragon they mean ferocity, fire and blood, anger, you know, brutality, but it's the cunning. That's the aspect that people don't anticipate.
Right, because you mentioned before dragons are supposed to be more intelligent than humans.
Yes. So this is the point that, you know, we're up to now where we're going to see how things play out. I think there's been a lot of misdirection, a lot of kind of like double painting where they've kind of painted you a picture on both sides. Like there's this idea of a mad queen. And some people go like, oh, Daenerys, she's going to be the mad queen. Like her father was the mad king. But I'm like, Cersei's the mad queen.
Yeah, Cersei.
Like we're getting distracted from the fact that Cersei is fucking batshit.
Right. Yeah. Cersei is the mad queen. She is basically the mad, because again, she wants Daenerys to murder all of these people in King's Landing with dragon fire. Well, that was the big mark against Aerys, right? That he was going to just launch the I forgot what the name of that stuff is, but the
wildfire.
Yeah, he's going to launch the wildfire against his own people. That's why Jaime Lannister decided to kill him in the first place.
This is also like an interesting point because I don't think the dragons are going to burn down King's Landing, but I have a feeling King's Landing might still get burned down.
I mean, yeah, that's what Cersei wants. So it's the same thing, like Cersei wants her subjects to burn just like Aerys did during the last Great War.
Yeah. Cersei's gonna be calling for them to burn them all. Cersei's gonna be the one using wildfire.
Right. Cersei's just looking for a way to blame. Cersei just wants to blame it on Daenerys, you know. So Daenerys, it looks like a cruel, evil conqueror.
Yes. But people should have paid attention because Cersei's already wiped out an entire religion and families and houses and huge parts of the population with wildfire.
And speaking of Jaime Lannister, we got two things. We got him, he consummated his relationship with Brienne this episode. Mm-hmm. And then right after that happened.
And fanboys and girls squealed in delight.
And squealed. And then right after that, he was like, bye bitch, I gotta go be with my sister.
I think I had mentioned before, like double painting, like the idea of like painting Daenerys as the Mad Queen as a way of distracting you from the fact that Cersei's the fucking Mad Queen.
Right.
You know, you're painting both sides, but you're distracting them with one. I think they're doing very much the same thing with Jaime. I think it's less effective because I think most people are really seeing what it's for. Well, but if you pay attention to the way Jaime says things to Brienne when he's leaving, he says like, I pushed a boy out of a window, crippling him for life. For Cersei. Right. I killed my cousin to get back to Cersei. I did this for Cersei. He keeps adding that point in, and the point that, like, Brienne is believing is like, oh, I've lost him. He's going back to his sister. That's who he really loves. He doesn't actually love me. He's going back to try to save her. Right. When I think what he's really saying is, and not in an indirect way, because he doesn't want to actually say it to her. He wants it to be something that maybe she'll understand later. later, which is that he's going back to kill Cersei.
Right.
Because he realizes things, cause he takes this turn. The moment he takes this turn isn't when, you know, like, oh, like now that I've had this relationship, I decided I need my sister back. It's when he learns that Cersei killed another one of Daenerys' dragons.
Right. Yeah, that's true. He learns that.
He realizes what's happening. Cause like, and this is another callback because I think the way he reacted to that and his expression, I think people are going like, oh, he's shocked. Oh, he's worried about his sister. Or he's worried in general. I think there's even more to it because there was that moment in, it was either in episode 1 or 2 of this season in which it was episode 2 because Jaime wasn't in Winterfell until the very end of episode 1. But in episode 2 where Jaime and Tyrion are talking and Jaime says, you always saw Cersei as she was. You didn't fall for her lies. You saw what she was, but you loved her anyways, you know? And I think that is a point that I think that's part of what's being expressed on his face is he can see what Cersei's doing. Like when he learns that dragon's been killed and the other bits of information, everybody else is like, oh, now it's all at war. Well, he's seeing more. He's like, no, she's not just going to provoke a war. She's going to do something horrific. He sees that. Like, so, and I think in that moment with that look of kind of horror on his face, dawning horror at that moment, is remember that he killed King Aerys, the Mad King, when the Mad King was saying burn them all, kill them all. And now we have Cersei, who he's already seen use wildfire to wipe out the Sept of Baelor, who now we're learning took out one of the dragons and is escalating war. She's not even making an effort towards negotiations or anything else or any delay tactics. And I think that's what that's telling Jaime is that his sister is about to do something horrific.
Right.
And I don't just mean like she's going to do well in the war, like that she's going to kill her own people with wildfire kind of thing. Like he's getting the same feeling he had with Aerys. At least that's how I see it. Everybody can see it differently. I guess they have a right to their own opinions, damn it.
And the episode ends with Tyrion kind of approaching Cersei, you know, and making this heartfelt plea, like basically like pleading with her to just surrender and that if she surrenders, she won't die. You know, she could actually go on to live a good life, you know, just making this heartfelt plea that just falls on deaf ears because, you know, Cersei responds to Tyrion's speech by just killing Missandei and being done with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Missandei's last word.
Yeah. Dracarys.
Meaning dragon fire. That was a message to Daenerys.
Yeah, that was a message to Daenerys, yeah.
So we'll have to see how Daenerys interprets that. If she interprets it as, I need to burn them all, or if she interprets that as the way I think she interprets it as, Dracarys was a line that, if you remember, when Missandei first met, Daenerys, it was, she negotiated to give up one of her dragons and then pulled a swerve on the slave owner at the last second and took all of the Unsullied away from her. So I think that there's a good chance that her Dracarys wasn't a cry to burn them all so much as a turn the tides, you know, like you did before. Because you have to think that was like kind of her first moment of real interaction with Daenerys was all of that.
Right, exactly.
So that's it for season 8, episode 4. Episode 5 airs tomorrow, from the time that we're recording this. As we mentioned before, I think I might have mentioned it last week only, so I guess nobody heard it, but it's the same director who did episode 3. He's kind of their big battle director. They bring him in for huge battle scenes and stuff.
It's going to be a huge battle.
Yes, that's the implication. This is going to be a big battle episode.
Oh, it better be. It's the second to last episode of the series.
Yeah. An all-out siege on King's Landing, possibly parallel to what we just had in the third episode, except the outside's kind of reverse.
Right.
We'll have to kind of see how that plays out, and I'm excited to continue on. I still have like a few misgivings about kind of the White Walker threat being ended in episode 3. I still feel like a little like I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that, but
right, because I thought that was actually the end game. I thought
yeah.
I always looked at the series kind of as the point that people had their political squabbles, but ultimately the political infighting was not as important as dealing with the major threat.
I thought it was all going to end up kind of merging. I thought the two different threats were going to kind of end up.
So I was kind of disappointed that they were like, oh, we took out the threat. Now let's go back to the political infighting.
Yeah. And like we said, we were talking about how we don't agree with the people's opinions that were down on episode 3, but I think what we're both trying to say here, it's definitely what I'm trying to say, but I can't put words in your mouth, obviously, is that we haven't seen it yet. So we have to see where they're going. So I have some misgivings. I have some concerns about what episode 3 means for the rest of the season. I do have some concerns about that, but I'm not writing off the season.
Right, me neither.
Because of that. I want to see what they're going to do.
I will make a judgment on the season when the season is actually over.
And your judgment will be final.
Yes. but when the series is over, it'll be a good time to reflect on the entire series as a whole to see if it was worth it. To see if,
Here's the thing, I don't understand when people say, I know you didn't mean it that way, but when people say, now none of it was worth it. It's like, did you enjoy it while it was going on?
Right.
And how can you say it wasn't worth it? Even if you didn't like the way it turned out, it gave you a good ride along the way. So even if it completely misses the landing, you still got entertainment out of it,
Right.
So whether it ends up being a legendary series that you look back on in adoration, or whether it ends up just being something that entertained you and eventually disappointed you, who stuck with the series this long that was just bored through the whole thing? Going it better have a payoff because the rest of this is just garbage and I hate it all. But I think there's going to be a huge payoff and that's the only reason I'm watching.
It sure seems like there are some people like that. The way people constantly bitch about this show.
But as I said, that's the end of our discussion of Game of Thrones this week. So all we have left to talk about what's coming up in the week ahead. As I said, we're recording this on Saturday, May 11th.
The apocalypse.
This Friday, May 10th, 2019, Easy returned to Netflix. The Society came to Netflix. Wine Country to Netflix. Sneaky Pete returned for its 3rd season on Amazon Prime. And Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. returned on ABC. On Sunday, May 12th, 2019, besides Game of Thrones, Our Cartoon President returns on Showtime. This is the Stephen Colbert produced kind of parody of Donald Trump. It's animated. On Monday, May 13th, LA's Finest comes to Spectrum. This is a sequel, a quasi-sequel to Bad Boys, if you've seen the Bad Boys movies, with the female police officer from that movie and a new partner, and it's kind of following them. Same actor. Friday, May 17th, 2019, Catch-22, a new miniseries comes to Hulu based on the book. This is produced by and starring George Clooney, so kind of a big name attached to that, and it's a very famous book being adapted on Hulu. Fleabag returns to Amazon Prime, and The Rain returns to Netflix. So that's what's coming up in the next week, but as with our podcast, I think all anybody's really going to be talking about still is Game of Thrones. Next week, as usual, we're going to continue our discussion of Game of Thrones. We'll talk about the penultimate episode of the series. Until then, you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. Just look up either The Total Screen or The Weekly Set. Either one of those should get you there if you just do a search in your podcast client. If not, you can watch the entire backlog of this podcast on our YouTube channel. It's just going to have the cover art from the episode and the audio. That's all it's there. But if you just want to listen, you can go through all the way from episode 1 of this podcast. This is episode 205 that we're doing right now. So, you have a lot of room you can go over. A lot of territory you can explore if you want to. There's other older content on there as well. And I've been doing weekly episodes. The day after Game of Thrones airs, I've been putting up episodes that are 1 to 3 minutes long. long, I guess, where I talk about like one aspect of an episode of Game of Thrones, whether it be like a prediction I'm making based on certain circumstances, or like a narrative technique that was being used in an episode, or just a choice to do something, or the concern even like for episode 3, I talked about the concern about the White Walkers, the threat being ended so early, even though the White Walkers is the first threat we ever had in the entire series. The very first scene of the very first episode of Game of Thrones involved some men of the Night's Watch and White Walkers. So I talked about that for episode 3, so you can check that out if you want, every Monday after an episode of Game of Thrones airs. But that's it. So thank you everybody for listening to the podcast. Good night, and Valor Morghulis.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best